Here's something fascinating that nobody talks about. An entire generation was raised differently than any generation before, and the patterns are everywhere once you start looking. If you're a millennial, you've probably noticed something. Maybe it's the way everyone in your age group seems to joke about the same things, dissociating, needing therapy. I can't adult today. Maybe it's how common certain experiences are, the mental health struggles, the difficulty with long-term relationships, the feeling that something's just off. You probably thought it was just you, or just your friend group, or just modern life being hard. But what if it wasn't random? What if there were patterns, deliberate, systematic patterns woven into the media you consumed, the events you witnessed, the culture you absorbed growing up? This isn't about conspiracy theories. This is about documented psychological techniques, publicly known programs, and cultural engineering that's been written about in academic papers and declassified documents. It's about asking a simple question. If you wanted to shape how an entire generation thinks, feels, and behaves, how would you do it? And then realizing someone already figured that out. Think about the media you consumed growing up. Remember how many music videos in the late 2000s featured mental asylum imagery? How many pop stars had very public breakdowns, disappeared briefly, came back medicated and compliant? Remember how mental illness went from stigmatized to almost fashionable? Like having diagnoses became part of your identity, something to list in your bio? Or consider this, millennials are called the bridge generation. Born in the analog world, raised in the digital one. You remember life before smartphones, before social media, before constant connectivity, but you also adapted to it faster than any generation before. You're old enough to remember what was lost, but young enough to be fully integrated into what replaced it. That's a very specific position, a very useful position if you're trying to transition society from one mode of being to another. Here's where it gets interesting. There are different types of programming, actual terms used in psychological literature and intelligence documents. Alpha programming creates baseline compliance, people who trust institutional narratives without question, who need external validation, who find comfort in following approved scripts. Beta programming sexualizes or desexualizes, creating extremes rather than balanced integration. Delta programming grooms people for service and systems, military, corporate, institutional. Theta programming targets those with heightened sensitivity or perception, either recruiting them or isolating them. Omega programming instills nihilism and depression, making resistance seem pointless. Sound familiar? Look around your social circle and you'll probably recognize these patterns. Not in everyone, but in enough people to make you wonder. The really fascinating part is how it was delivered. Not through obvious propaganda. That would trigger resistance. Instead, through entertainment, through education systems, through normalized responses to manufactured crises. 9/11 happened at precisely the right moment in millennial development. Old enough to be traumatized, young enough not to question the narrative that followed. 2K primed you for apocalyptic thinking. The constant stream of fear-based messaging taught you that the world is dangerous and you need protection from authorities. And then there's the electronic component. This isn't mystical, it's physics. Your brain operates on electrical signals. Your environment is saturated with electromagnetic frequencies from Wi-Fi, cell towers, power lines, devices. These interact with your biology. Some people are more sensitive to this than others. As if you've ever felt overwhelmed in cities, exhausted by technology, or experienced unexplained symptoms that fluctuate based on your environment, you might be picking up on something real. The pharmaceutical angle is perhaps the most documented. Millennials are the most medicated generation in history. Antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, ADHD treatments prescribed at unprecedented rates, often for life. These medications affect neurotransmitters, which affect perception, which affects how you experience reality. They're not always wrong or bad, But ask yourself, in a sick society, is the problem with individuals who struggle or with the society making them sick? Here's what makes this story different from typical doom and gloom narratives. Recognizing the pattern is the first step to breaking it. You can't escape programming you don't know exists. But once you see it, really see it, you can start making conscious choices instead of running unconscious scripts. Some millennials are already figuring this out. They're the ones who deleted social media and feel better, the ones who moved out of cities and noticed their anxiety decreased, the ones who stopped watching news and found their worldview became less apocalyptic, the ones who got off medications and reconnected with intuition they'd forgotten they had, the ones who rejected both the soy jack stereotype and the himbo alternative and built something authentic instead. The system wanted to create a generation of compliant consumers, too fractured to organize, too medicated to perceive clearly, too traumatized to resist. In many ways, it worked, but not completely. Because here's the thing about psychological programming, it only works perfectly on people who don't know it's happening. The moment you become aware, you gain choice. The moment you see the pattern, you can step outside it. This isn't about fear. This is about recognition. It's about looking at your life, your struggles, your generation's collective challenges, and asking, what if these weren't personal failures? What if they were predictable outcomes of specific inputs? What if you're not broken? You're responding exactly as expected to a toxic environment. And if that's true, what becomes possible when you change the environment? When you change what you consume, where you live, who you surround yourself with, what frequencies reach your brain? When you take back agency over your own consciousness. The millennials who are waking up to this aren't running scared. They're getting curious. They're experimenting. They're comparing notes. They're building alternatives. They're becoming what the system never intended: aware, ungovernable, and genuinely free. The question isn't whether programming happened. The evidence is everywhere, documented, observable. The question is, now that you see it, what are you going to do about it? Because the cage only works when you don't know you're in it, and now you know. Click the link in the description to read the research in full.